Have you ever wondered why you keep loving someone who clearly doesn't love you back? You know how they make you feel. You know the calls they don't return, the effort they don't match, the way you shrink yourself just to keep the peace. And yet you stay. You have told yourself, this was the last time. You have promised that you would stop waiting. But something always pulls you back. That's exactly what we need to talk about today. Because if you've ever found yourself stuck in a pattern you can't seem to escape, whether it's a relationship, a dynamic, a way of thinking, the answer to why you're stuck has almost nothing to do with the other person and everything to do with what's happening inside you. This isn't about blame. It's not about making you feel broken or damaged. It's about showing you the mechanics of what's actually going on, because once you see it clearly, something shifts. And that shift is where real change begins. So if there's any part of your life right now where you feel like you know better but can't seem to act on it, stay with me. By the end of this, you're going to understand why, and more importantly, you're going to know what to do about it. Let's start at the beginning. Why do certain people keep ending up in the same painful situations? Different people, different circumstances, same feeling. And why do others seem to just move on? It comes down to something most of us never actually think about. The way we learned to feel safe. When we're young, our brains are essentially taking notes. They're building a model of the world based on what we experience. And one of the biggest things they're tracking is this. What does love feel like? What does connection feel like? What does it feel like to matter to someone? If you grew up around calm, consistent affection, you probably internalized that being close to people is safe, that you don't have to earn it, that it just exists. But if the love you received as a kid was unpredictable, warm one day, withdrawn the next, your brain built a very different model. It learned that love is something you chase, something you have to prove yourself worthy of, something that, when it finally shows up, feels like relief, like you won something. And here's where it gets complicated. When you're an adult and you meet someone who treats you consistently well, kind, reliable, presents something in your nervous system says, this feels off, too easy, boring even. But when you meet someone who runs hot and cold, who pulls you in and then pulls back, your brain lights up, not because it's healthy, but because it's familiar, because it matches the internal map you've been carrying your whole life. That familiarity feels like chemistry, but it's not. It's a pattern trying to finish an old story. And the deeper you go into that dynamic, the harder it becomes to leave, because now it's not just about the other person. It's about an old wound that finally has a face, an old need that finally has a target. Which brings us to the mechanism that makes all of this feel like an addiction, because that's exactly what it is. You've probably noticed this. There are moments in the middle of all the chaos where everything clicks, where they're exactly who you need them to be, where it feels like, maybe this is finally it. And those moments hit differently than any consistent kindness ever could. That's not an accident. Back in the mid-1900s, a psychologist named B.F. Skinner was running experiments on behavior. He noticed something strange. When animals were rewarded randomly, not every time, not on a schedule, but unpredictably, they became almost frantic in their efforts to get the reward, more so than if they were rewarded every single time. The uncertainty itself was the hook. Now take that and apply it to your emotional life. When affection shows up unpredictably, your brain doesn't settle. It stays alert. It keeps scanning. It keeps trying. Because the reward might come at any moment, and your nervous system has decided this is worth obsessing over. And slowly, without realizing it, you start recalibrating what you'll accept. Things that would have been deal breakers at the beginning become things you explain away. Your standards don't disappear, they just get quietly lowered, one compromise at a time, until you're accepting things you swore you never would. And the most painful part? You start to believe the problem is you. That if you were just a little more patient, a little less reactive, a little different, it would work. That belief doesn't come from nowhere. It gets put there. One of the most disorienting experiences you can have in a close relationship is watching your own perception of reality get slowly rewritten. You notice something. You name it. And instead of being heard, you get told you're imagining things, that you're too sensitive, that your memory is wrong, that it never happened. The first time, you doubt them. The second time, you doubt yourself. And by the 10th time, you've stopped trusting your own read on situations entirely. This is what's called gaslighting, and it's effective not because it's dramatic, but because it's gradual. It erodes your confidence so slowly that by the time you notice you've lost it, you can't even identify when it happened. And there's another layer. Sometimes the person doing the most damage is also putting their own failures onto you. Their jealousy becomes accusations of your dishonesty. Their neglect becomes complaints about your neediness. Their chaos becomes a story about your instability, and you carry it. Because at some point, it started to feel like yours. When you've spent enough time in that environment, leaving stops feeling like freedom and starts feeling like a terrifying unknown. Because the question underneath isn't just, will I be okay? It's, will anyone ever want me? Will I ever feel this intensely about someone again? Was I the problem all along? And that's exactly where fear takes over. We don't talk honestly enough about how deeply most people fear being alone. Not the surface-level discomfort of an empty apartment, but the existential fear that being alone means being unwanted, means something is wrong with you. That fear gets fed to us from a young age, and when a relationship has also spent months or years telling you that you're difficult, too much, not enough, you start to believe that this, as painful as it is, might be the best you're going to get. But here's what I want you to actually hear. What you're experiencing isn't love withdrawal. It's conditioning withdrawal. You're not missing the person. You're missing what the hope of them felt like. You're missing the version of them that existed at the beginning, or maybe only in your imagination of what they could be. Real change doesn't happen because someone loves a person hard enough. Real change happens when someone decides to change because they want to. Full stop. And if you've been waiting for that moment across weeks, months, years of promises, it's time to ask yourself what you're really waiting for. Okay. So how do you actually get out? Because this is where most conversations stop. They tell you to leave, to love yourself, to move on. They don't tell you that even when you decide to leave, your brain is going to fight you. That withdrawal is real. That the first days feel like grief, even when you know you made the right call. So here's what actually helps. The first thing is a clean break. No slow fade, no staying friends, no one last conversation for closure. Every point of contact is a re-entry point for the cycle. The closure you're looking for isn't going to come from one more conversation. It's going to come from finally stopping the loop. Block, mute, remove. Not out of anger, out of self-respect. When the withdrawal hits, and it will, your brain is going to run highlight reels. The good moments, the potential, the warmth. It's going to conveniently edit out everything that brought you to this point. This is just the addiction talking. The antidote is to stay grounded in what was real. Write it down if you have to. Not out of bitterness, out of honesty. And then comes the work that most people skip, because it's harder than anything else. Figuring out who you are when you're not organizing your life around someone else's moods. What did you care about before this took up all your space? What parts of yourself did you quietly set aside? That's not a small question. It's the whole question. You don't need another relationship to feel complete. That idea was sold to you. The love that actually changes things is the kind you build inside yourself. the kind that stops accepting treatment that contradicts your worth. Here's what I want to leave you with. There's a moment that comes, and it's different for everyone, but it comes where you stop waiting for the other person to become who you needed them to be. Where you stop making your peace contingent on their change. Where you decide that your life is worth more than the hope of a version of this that was never going to exist. That moment doesn't feel triumphant. It usually just feels quiet, a little sad, and then, slowly, clear. The fog lifts. You start sleeping better. You start remembering what it felt like to trust yourself. And one day you realize you haven't thought about them in hours. Then days. That's not indifference. That's freedom. But it starts with one decision. Not a perfect one. Not a painless one. Just a real one. What part of this hit closest to home for you? Drop it in the comments, not just for me, but because someone else is going to read what you write and realize they're not alone. And if this landed, don't stop here. The next video goes even deeper into exactly this process. You're going to want to see it.